Hello and welcome to this live video discussion. We are live on CoinDesk's X and YouTube accounts. And today we're in a discussion that's titled State of the Blockchain Nation. I'm joined by US Congressman Byron Donalds and Metallicus CEO Marshall Hayner. Good evening to you both. We're getting into the evening now. It's been a long Monday, but here we are. I'm excited for this discussion.
Yeah, so
Thanks for
am I.
having
It's
us.
good to be here.
All right, I want to start at a very high level for this discussion for folks who are watching this video. I think it's important for them to understand where you're both coming from. So, Congressman, I'm going to start with you. Just give us a really quick tidbit. Why does crypto resonate with you? I know you really have been a proponent for crypto in your position. Talk to me a little bit about why it resonates with you.
For me, it's really one overarching reason and a bunch of underlying ones. First is that it's really a holder, and what it can be is a holder of value outside of the dollar, and also outside of some of your traditional metals, whether that be gold, silver, or other types of commodities. And I think that in the digital landscape, which is not going anywhere, it's only going to continue to grow, become far more dynamic and interwoven in the lives of Americans, giving people the ability to be able to maintain some semblance of value for the money that they earn from the fruits of their labor, their ingenuity, etc. That to me is just common sense policy for everybody. I think as a backdrop to that, I have a lot of concerns about how the Federal Reserve has diluted purchasing power uh, for Americans. It's something that has put our reserve currency status at risk. A lot of other issues stem from that, and that's really a protection hedge for a lot of people. The third thing is that what we're seeing in this new industry of digital assets, of course, of which cryptocurrency is a part, there are a lot of fledgling entrepreneurs from all walks of life. And some people call it the new gold rush. Like we're creating a bunch of new 49ers out here in this space. But you have to give that industry an opportunity to thrive and to flourish, to see what it truly can be, what heights can it reach, what type of efficiencies it brings to markets, whether that's just purely financial or technology markets or the economy overall. And I think that it would be imprudent for government regulation to impede that growth simply because members of Congress and staffers on Capitol Hill don't know what it is, or B, they want to treat it as a boogeyman for more of the current regulatory regime, which is so centered on consumer protections that it stifles innovation and it stifles the free flowing of capital. So that's why I'm where I am.
We're going to come back and dive a little bit deeper into some of those issues in just a moment. And for anyone who's just joining our live discussion here, we're live on X and YouTube, and you have the ability to comment. So if you have any questions or comments for the Congressman or Marshall, please feel free to put them below this video, and maybe we will get to them if you are not trolling us. Marshall, I'm going to kick it off to you now. I know that you come from a little bit more of a crypto native background. One of the people who was an early Doge supporter, I believe. Talk to me a little bit about why crypto resonates with you.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm a patriot. I'm an American. I believe in freedom of speech and the Constitution, and I believe access to your money is part of that. Cryptocurrency for me was so exciting because it was kind of the discovering the internet of money. It's a new technology. It doesn't have to be constrained to just Bitcoin or one digital asset. It's a technology. And one of the things that I frequently say is that cryptocurrency in particular and Bitcoin act as a litmus test to freedom. So when you look at other countries that ban this technology, that limit this technology, they tend to be authoritarian regimes that don't want to allow people to really own their own money. And so that is something that was very exciting for me. But more so, I grew up as a child of the internet. And when I discovered Bitcoin in late 2009, I struggled with the idea of how does this work with the financial system? And it took me a few weeks to understand that it's just a transparent public ledger of accounting that's unalterable. And that was so exciting because I realized in that moment, this is going to replace all of the modern systems. Everything is going to connect to that transparent, unalterable ledger. And we'll have different types of systems. We'll have certainly different types of digital assets. Dogecoin, for me, why I got involved in Dogecoin was because, believe it or not, after a few years of the cryptocurrency space expanding, people got too serious, in my opinion, about Bitcoin, and they kind of scared some of the outsiders in that we couldn't have fun with this technology. So Dogecoin emerged as a joke that I think brought a lot of young people into it. And they are, from a technology standpoint, the same code base, Bitcoin and Dogecoin. So I think it was just an exciting thing for me. But expanding there and building my company with Metallicus, our goal at Metallicus is building the digital banking network, or so we call it. And we want to connect traditional finance to Web3 through the blockchain in a compliant manner, and innovate responsibly. As I've heard that tagline thrown out before from those in government, but I believe that this technology will completely revolutionize the world.
I think everyone in the industry is saying that we want to innovate responsibly, and we just need the right guardrails to do that. Congressman, I want to come back to you. This discussion is called the State of Blockchain Nation. Since consensus happened earlier this year, I talked to SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce there, and she said that she just didn't really think that folks in Washington cared that much about this industry. They didn't care that much to get educated to make the progress that I think both of you just outlined there. Talk to me about the state of Blockchain Nation. What does it look like now? Do those comments resonate with you?
The comments actually, I believe, are emblematic of a lot of Capitol Hill. Like I said earlier, I think it's an issue where a lot of members simply just don't know what it is, or they've heard vagaries about it. They've not taken the time, and let me be extra clear: their staffs have not taken the time to really understand the cryptocurrency space, the digital asset space. So I think when you talk about the state of blockchain nation, we're in a serious holding pattern. And forgive me, not even forgive me, I'm just going to talk straight to you. I'm going to get a little political. In the current environment right now, you have two candidates running for president. Donald Trump has been very clear about what his position is with respect to the digital assets industry. He wants to make sure that the regulatory environment is focused and scoped so that it allows for the flourishing of the entire industry. I don't think he doesn't really want, and I know I don't want, a picking and choosing of a certain currency or a certain stable coin. He really wants to see it flourish and grow. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I guess now led by Vice President Harris, they're murky at best about what their viewpoints are on digital assets. When you talk to Democrats on the Financial Services Committee, where I sit on, they are mostly opposed to even creating a regulatory environment for the digital asset space. And what that means is it makes it incredibly difficult to raise capital and expand business operations and create business opportunities in the United States if there's not at least a basic regulatory structure.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that. We saw bipartisan support for Fit 21. I've had Congressman Ro Khanna talk to me on CoinDesk, who is really, behind bipartisan support for crypto. A lot of the things you've said, I think that he might agree with. Is that changing? Are there more Democrats who are maybe stopping, taking a pause to listen and getting educated to come on board with some of the things that you've been talking about for a little while now?
Well, I would say Roe I would say is in the minority within his own party when it comes to digital assets. He's very forward thinking when it comes to digital assets. So is Richie Torres, who's on financial services with me. Jake Auchincloss is another member on the Democrat side of the aisle who's very open to it. But then you have roadblocks, and not with Jake. I don't want to say he's open. He's supportive. Jake Auchincloss is supportive. I want to be clear on that. But you still have Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Brad Sherman, sort of the legacy Democrat leadership who is opposed to something like Fit 21. Fit 21 does have bipartisan support, but in terms of the leadership lines in the Democrat Party, that's where the bipartisanship comes to an end. And and again, look, I don't. This is obviously about cryptocurrencies in particular, but also the blockchain nation. It's important for people who are large supporters of blockchain and digital assets and cryptocurrencies to understand that in this presidential cycle, the next president is going to have a major say in how the regulatory environment is going to be shaped for the digital assets industry. I don't know what Kamala Harris's position is because she won't answer questions to anybody. So I don't know what her position is. When I look at this industry in particular, we have, in my view, the potential for a $1 to $3 trillion industry in the United States. It could be massively more depending on the technology. I don't know because I can't predict it. That's where you have a new industry that has so much potential. The only thing I'll add, and I'll stop. I don't want to filibuster. The only other thing I'll add is that coinciding with a robust digital assets industry in the United States is the need for massive amounts of baseload power to support the technological advancement. And so you're going to need a resurgence of nuclear power in our country. You're going to need a resurgence and an expansion of natural gas capabilities in our country to create the electricity baseload you need in order to support the technology as it grows, not just in terms of dollar size in the economy, but with power consumption to support all the servers and all the equipment necessary.
Marshall, I want to kick it over to you now and talk about crypto's, I guess, growing role, the growing spotlight on crypto in the upcoming election. Some numbers that came out recently said that the crypto industry accounts for nearly half of corporate spending for the upcoming election. I mean, if I were to tell you a year ago that this would be the state of corporate funding for the election, would you be surprised?
I absolutely would believe it. I've been involved in crypto when it was just a hobby, when the only conferences were, tops 30 people in a room together. And now I've watched as, I've seen events go into the thousands of people filling large conference halls. Like AI and like Congressman said, energy is needed, not only for proof of work, but for many innovations in the US. And it's very important that we manage that energy policy responsibly. I absolutely see the potential because blockchain really, in some ways, is disrupting one of the oldest industries, which is banking. And I believe that it will ultimately be the underlying technology that connects banks and financial institutions globally. Will it be Bitcoin? There are a lot of people that would say, yeah, I would like for it to be that, but I'm a multi-chain believer. I'm working on a blockchain myself called Metal Blockchain that's trying to connect credit unions and banks. I believe that the marriage of these two technologies will bring together just a complete sea change. If you think about where corporations were 30 years ago, with snail mail and fax machines and things that the modern generation probably doesn't even know what they are. That's what is happening with money. And if it wasn't a big deal, then no one would care. It wouldn't be, you wouldn't see those stats that you just mentioned, but there is big money involved. And it's hard to imagine that this is just the tip of the spear or the iceberg, but it's so much larger than you can see. And I think there are certain areas like AI and blockchain that over the next 10 to 15 years will become, as Congressman said, multi-trillion-dollar industries. I think it's important to separate Bitcoin and digital assets between the technology as well. There's crypto and there's blockchain, but we need coherent federal and state regulation and legislation on both ends. And I believe that there is a lot of regulation around money that applies to cryptocurrency, but I think we need to go further and to take this kind of blanket approach where we say we don't need to change anything. That's wrong. We're now in 2024. We need to adapt with the policies around money, around digital assets. And like Congressman said, I think I look at both parties. I never would have really before have said, one party or the other party. But when I look at the parties just from the issue of cryptocurrency, I see one party that is making very concise statements and another party that is, creating a crypto campaign, but only as a reaction to probably what you just said, that the fundraising element, and this aspect of cryptocurrency being in the public eye is becoming a national issue. It'll be a national security issue. It'll be an issue of finance and technology. And I think to ignore it would be a big mistake.
But isn't the reality here, to get any movement on legislation in the United States, we need both parties to be on the same page, at least with this issue, regardless of who is president or what each party says in the run up to the election?
Well, real quick, and I don't know if that was for Marshall, but Jen, I'll just say, and real quick before I come to your question, Jen, what Marshall is saying about companies and technology is absolutely correct. I don't even think, I'm 45 years old, so unless you're my age, you probably know what a Blockbuster video is. Most people, if you're 20, you're like, what? You actually had to go to the store to get a VHS tape to watch a movie?
About
like
what? Like,
that was a thing, but it was. But Blockbuster didn't want to innovate for whatever the reasons were. Redbox came along, people were getting DVDs in the mail and at gas stations, and now even Redbox is kind of a thing of the past, and now we've completely moved into streaming. At any rate, innovation is a wonderful thing. It should always be encouraged, not discouraged. I think specific to your question, Jen, if you look at some of the major pieces of financial regulation that have passed in the modern era, Dodd-Frank is the last recent one. That one was done with all Democrat control in both chambers and with Barack Obama at the time. Sarbanes-Oxley, I believe that was during the Clinton administration. You had some bipartisanship around Sarbanes-Oxley, but not much. It was mostly driven by the White House. So these major shifts in new regulation in the financial industry typically are led by the White House. So the White House will lead it, and then one party, and it's just the way it is, one party will typically take most ownership of that regulation. I think that when you're looking at this space going forward, who's sitting in those chairs is going to largely determine what the regulation is going to look like. And that's why the fundraising that obviously has started in the digital assets cryptocurrency space, married with the proposals from both campaigns and from people who are running down ballot in states, that stuff really, really matters. Like Ohio is the perfect example. You have Bernie Moreno's challenging Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown, until this year, campaign season, I might add, his positions on cryptocurrency, blockchain, and digital assets have been very, I would say, tough to the industry until right now, because he's trying to win his Senate seat again. So those are the type of dynamics that are occurring right now. So all these races do matter in terms of the future of the industry.
I think you make a valid point there, Congressman Marshall. I'm going to bring it back over to you. I know that Metallicus is a fully remote company, and just clear this up for me. It is a US-based company, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So from that perspective, I mean, tell me a little bit more about the regulatory environment in the United States. Is there anything that, you wake up, you go to work every day, you're operating this business, you have employees, you have customers, you have partners. Is there anything that scares you because of the regulatory uncertainty?
Yeah, and just to go back to your previous question as well, I want to see more support from the Democratic side as well. And there's great work being done by Gillibrand and Rokana and Richie Torres, and there's a lot of great work being done, but unfortunately it has fallen a little quiet on that side, and I'd like to see more, and I agree. In terms of how difficult it's been for the crypto space, I can't understate how, I really can't understate it. It is, if you're in this space and you remain in this space for the past couple of years, you really like it. You're really passionate about this space, because no other startup scene would go through the pressure and stress that the blockchain space has gone through. Just simply getting a bank account as a company that interfaces with crypto is next to impossible. Working with financial services companies is very difficult. Metallicus has really, I frequently say, had to work 10 times as hard as the normal fintech startup to establish and maintain these relationships. And from the regulatory standpoint, there is a lot of risk, because the landscape is being formed right now, and it's rapidly evolving. And to go back to what I said earlier, I look at cryptocurrency as a litmus test for freedom. That might sound a little cheesy, but it's true. In Russia, North Korea wants to steal your crypto, but they don't want to give it to their citizens because that would make them free. And so, we're at a pivotal point in the United States where do we go the direction that crypto is self-hosted wallets are not allowed? Do we go a direction where there's no clarity and we push this multi-trillion-dollar industry to Europe and UAE and other places? Or do we embrace it as the software leader that we are, the global software leader that we are, Silicon Valley? That's where you'll find many of the startups in the blockchain space, and anybody that's working in this space will spend some time there at some point. And at one point, I housed my company in San Francisco physically, and we had an office downtown and everything. And then COVID hit, and I realized, given the global nature of blockchain, my co-founder and CTO is Belgian, that let's start to make things a little more remote. And I think a lot of companies did that, and I think that's one of the powers of blockchain. But we really have to keep the innovation here in the United States. If we send a message to our entrepreneurs in the crypto and blockchain space that America doesn't want you, then there's so many jobs being lost, so much in revenue that's being lost. And it's really hard to measure because it's not just those things. It's everything that's going to come after that. And imagine if the United States was not the leader around internet technology. Imagine if Silicon Valley didn't exist. How would that affect the economy today? And I would say that it would be absolutely detrimental if we had crushed the internet 20 years ago.
That is a valid point. I just want to reintroduce ourselves to the audience. Some folks who may have joined halfway through, we are talking about the state of the blockchain nation here on this live discussion. If you have any questions, just pop them under the video and we'll be sure to direct them to the right panelist. There is a question here from James Barnett. Congressman, I believe this is for you. And I think you spoke to it earlier on in the conversation. It's possible that this person joined a little bit later. They say, are there any plans within the Republican camp to push the pro-digital asset message more?
There are, let me back up. Plans, what it is really campaigns. You really only have a couple of lanes to push messages. It's only but so much bandwidth. I think the Trump campaign has put out, on their website kind of what they're looking at, what they're trying to do. I know the president has gone and made speeches directly to the industry about his viewpoint on that technology. But where we are now, 74, 73 days away from election day, they're pretty locked in on, this battle, with Vice President Harris and talking about all the public policy issues. I think it's one where, it's going to really require the industry to kind of, and not just the industry overall, but people within it to go and just kind of do their homework and figure out what their positions are. President Trump's are very clear. As it stands today, I don't think Vice President Harris has put out a position on it at all. And so that's kind of where that is. I think it's incumbent upon members like myself, members who, we're not running for president, but, obviously, we support President Trump to continue to push out what his agenda is. And, what his agenda is very clearly, he wants to create a framework that allows the industry to thrive and to succeed. And so, that's along the lines of what I want. That's along the lines of what Tom Emmer, the majority whip in the House, wants, and many other of our colleagues on Capitol Hill. But it's tough to put out messages, especially in presidential campaigns, because one or two or three messages kind of like soak up the atmosphere. I'm gonna get a little real again for a moment. The thing I just don't like about politics, even being an elected official, is that like the silliest things soak up the news cycle. Things that really have no bearing on the future dominate a news cycle for 48, 72 hours. It can be really frustrating when you're trying to make sure key public policy issues like this one get addressed. But I'll take your question as something that we got to do better on. So I'm gonna go back not just to the campaign, but to my other colleagues and say, you know what, you guys, everybody's got to make themselves available. Let's talk about these issues. Let's engage the digital assets, blockchain, cryptocurrency industries, and let's really dig in about what we want to do and why we think that's important for the country.
Marshall, I want to kick it back to you as someone who's been in the space for a long time, someone who's been building in the space. The ethos is really this decentralization, not controlled by one entity, definitely not participated in by governments, really separate from the government. Right now, we're having this conversation here. Things have become more intertwined with the approval of the ETFs in the US, and now the involvement of crypto in politics. Talk to me about what that means for you. Does that mean the industry is maturing? Does that mean that we are venturing away from the original kinds of goal of Bitcoin and crypto? Talk to me about how you reflect on that.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm very grateful for the work of Congressman Donalds and Emmer, McHenry, Lummis. There's been so much great work that's been done, and we need to keep that momentum. And like you said earlier, from the Democratic side, I want to see more of it. It's not that I'm opposed to either side. I just think that this is such an important issue. We can't push it to the side. And to answer your question, I feel that it was inevitable. Congressman mentioned Blockbuster, and I remember as a kid loved going to Blockbuster with my parents, renting movies. And then when I was in college, there was a Redbox, and we watched as that industry, entertainment, went to streaming. And so if you compare that same analogy to financial services and money, and the technology grows, the original what they call crypto anarchist cypherpunk ethos of down with the banks, when I heard that, I thought that's cute, right? That's funny. But the reality is it doesn't go away. That's like thinking, well, now that we have Netflix, forget entertainment. We won't need movies anymore. But actually, that's the whole platform, right? It's just that the technology has upgraded and grown. So I bet my career and my company on that we're going to bridge that gap and to make it safe and easy and compliant, transparent to use. Never before in the history of man have you had an unalterable public global ledger. And that's the real innovation. Will it become intertwined with government? Absolutely. And I think it will create more free and fair elections. It will bring transparency to government spending, to donations, also just in general to efficiency of movement of money. And people don't talk about it very often, but blockchain solved counterfeit currency. We solved it. It is solved now. And that innovation in and of itself is such a massive innovation that no one talks about. Will nations of the world move to digital currencies that utilize this technology, such as a CBDC? Absolutely. But in the same way, when we can compare money to the parcel service, it's like saying, well, will USPS put FedEx out of business? No, because the private enterprise and corporations will always have a niche and an edge for certain use cases and capabilities. And I'm a big believer in that. I probably myself will go to FedEx, but it doesn't mean that I can't use a CBDC as well. However, I'd like to see that innovation side coming from the private sector first and foremost. And again, innovate responsibly. I think that in our space, some people will laugh, but I think it's a very serious matter that if we want our technology to grow, and again, AI is another good comparison, you have to innovate responsibly. Otherwise, you will drown under regulation that doesn't make sense. And we need to interface with our elected representatives and have more people like Congressman Donalds out there who are representing us and speaking well about the subject. Because again, as the congressman mentioned, there hasn't been enough research on the Hill. And I think more of that needs to happen.
Marshall, I want to hear a little bit more about your perspective on CBDCs, because as you know, a lot of people in this industry are against CBDCs for a variety of different reasons, including privacy, control, centralization. What does the future of CBDCs look like to you? It sounds like you see some compromise there.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of fear mongering about it because of the potentials for censorship and things like that. But what I will say is I view it the same as money that's flowing through the Federal Reserve System. It's just another technology. Would I personally prefer to use a metal dollar or a USDC or stablecoin over that? Probably, because of its interface with fintechs and with cryptocurrency and the benefits of that. Like I said, I'd like to see it happen more in the private sector. I'm not entirely opposed to it, especially if it solves issues of, for example, solves the counterfeit currency issue. Again, I want to see it happen in the private sector. I think that, in my opinion, it's an inevitability. So it's not a question of, do I like it or do I not like it? I probably prefer the private version instead, because I feel that the corporations are always going to innovate faster than the government, and that's just historically the way that it works. But I see it as an inevitability. So it's not, it might be unpopular now and maybe it will change in the future. I do think that we need to support companies like Metallicus and Circle and Coinbase, and giving them the regulatory clarity and giving banks the clarity that they need. In 2020, we had some great regulatory memos coming out of the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, around how banks might interact with stable coins and cryptocurrency. And we need more of that. I think that that's really one of the biggest problems. And it actually harms the US, because when we don't adapt these policies and we fall behind the EU, for example, or UAE, we're losing the battle in terms of technology. And we are going to see these companies leave if we put them in such a difficult position.
Congressman, want to get your perspective here. What is your perspective on CBDCs in the US?
Well, I'll tell you, currently I'm opposed to it, and I understand Marshall's view, but to be blunt, I just don't trust the Fed, and I just don't trust the Treasury. Maybe I've seen too much as somebody who's a member of Congress on the Hill. My fear is that the technology potentially gives a nefarious actor at some point in the future an ability to really disturb the privacy rights of individuals. Right now with the American dollar, I can go transact anonymously with my dollars. That's my right. That's my ability. That's my own personal viewpoint. We've had this conversation on the Hill, several members, and this is in part why I personally believe that the most valuable engine in all of the entire digital asset space is actually the blockchain itself. I think it's more valuable just in terms of economic power than a stable coin, a cryptocurrency, or anything else. That the blockchain itself really is, in my view, where the gold is going to be made, because of the ability for the ledger to not be altered. And I think that's critical. But I think just because the ledger can't be altered doesn't mean the ledger can't be examined. And that's where my concern comes from with respect to federal agencies. So, in our conversations on the Hill, it's been much more about what is the penalty structure if you were even going to go down that road of a CBDC, and I do not right now, and I frankly don't envision I'll ever want to, with the current way Washington is structured. But even if you did, what is the penalty structure for any federal employee, any agency head, any elected official who decided to take matters into their own hand, to peer into the blockchain, to look at transactions without a court order, and not a FISA court order? I mean, a legitimate court order. That's kind of the breadth of my concerns. I will tell you right now, on Capitol Hill, I do not believe I don't actually not even believe I know the votes are not there for a CBDC. I know they're studying it, but they don't have the votes to execute one. I don't anticipate they'll have the votes for quite some time.
Congressman, you said that you're against it because you've seen too much. For folks who are watching who might not know what you're talking about, what have you seen? Can you give us any insight into that? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, what I mean by that is that with the federal agencies, they are very aggressive with their power positions when they choose to be. What an agency can do is they like to put out memoranda about various things that they're concerned about in particular industries. What ends up happening is the heads of those businesses, those industries, they see that stuff because their compliance offices see it. And the companies move as fast as possible to come into compliance with the memo. Now, mind you, the memo is not based upon rulemaking that is occurring. The memo is not based upon legislation that Congress is considering. The memo is not based upon a court case that's moving through the judicial system. It's just that might happen to be the purview of that agency or that department at that particular part in time, depending on who's the administration. So you have an ability for an agency to manipulate the actions of the market simply by putting out memos. The CFPB is notorious for doing that. The SEC does that right now, and so those are serious concerns of mine. A second piece is, and this is, depending on people's viewpoint, there is a concern where elements of our government have been surveilling the American people, have been suppressing speech of the American people, definitely through the COVID era in our country, but in other time periods before that. And those kind of thought processes and actions that have occurred in our government, all of that stuff has to go away. And there has to be some time where I think the American people can really begin to have trust in the agencies, in the pillars of our government before you can even go down the line of a CBDC.
All right, for those folks who are just joining us, you are watching a live discussion on CoinDesk's social channels. We are talking about the state of the blockchain nation, and I'm joined by U.S. Congressman Byron Donalds and Metallicus CEO Marshall Hayner. We have a few minutes left before we wrap up, so if you have questions, be sure to put them below this video. I have one question here. It is for both of you. Marshall, I'll throw it to you first. This person asks, given that blockchain connects countless industries beyond finance, like gaming, green tech, and healthcare, how can we address the concerns of political forces that oppose it and demonstrate its broader value?
I think that's a great question. I think that we really need to have bipartisan support and legislation on the books, again, with bipartisan support, because without it, it starts to become a partisan issue. And then it's easy to point the finger and say, well, this party wants, to do bad things or whatever, and you can kind of weaponize it. When it's really not a question of which party, but it's a question about technology and advancing technology in the United States and really being, like I said, a leader of this technology. I think that there's some incredible stuff that can be done with decentralized autonomous organizations and also the transparency around digital identity, not in a way where we're having data breaches and the kind of the systems of the past, but newer systems where, for example, we have our social security number. We put that information out there when we sign up for a bank account or many different applications. Shouldn't it just be my name at Marshall and I'll cryptographically verify it on the blockchain instead of giving out my password every time? I think this technology needs to be harnessed for great good instead of great evil. And I think that like I said at the beginning of the stream, we're at a very pivotal crossroads. We need support from both sides of the aisle. And I also think that, one of the greatest things about blockchain is that we can use this technology to prove things, to prove statements, to prove things that people said and transactions that were made. And so to the extent that we can use digital identity in a way that doesn't compromise people's privacy, but we can use it to further secure our identity. Like I said, do away with the old social security number system and create a cryptographic system. I'd be much happier with that because, when I see these data breaches, I think, well, what's more damning than that when someone can go out and download your information off the web and impersonate you? We need support from both sides, from Republicans and Democrats. And it seems like a lot of support has come from the Republican community, but that doesn't mean that there are not elected representatives on the Democratic side that are pushing for that. We just need more.
Congressman Marshall just brought up, the technology, what we can use blockchains for. You brought up DAOs there. Congressman, you were talking a little bit about the technology a few minutes ago. I've spoken to governments around the world that are experimenting with how they can use blockchain and different services that are offered to the public. I know at a state level, there are governments that are also experimenting with that here in the United States. On a federal level, is there an appetite to start implementing the technology into different processes, start experimenting with it as part of that education process?
Look, I definitely hope so. I know that some agencies have started talking about it, but I mean, in Washington, just starting to talk about it typically is a 7 to 10 year arc, which I frankly, which is why government is very, very slow, and that's why I don't want to impede industries from growing because government takes too long to catch up. I think there are definitely areas where it can be implemented. I'll give you one example. There's been this process of trying to digitize medical records for veterans in the VA, so that so people who served our country can actually have their medical records be available with any medical professional or any medical office in the private sector, so they can still get the healthcare that they need at a much faster pace than they can at the VA. I think we've spent 90 million, $100 million on it. It still doesn't work. I think that the blockchain kind of coming into that space, not just for the digitizing of those records, but to make sure and have 100% certainty that this is the record for Corporal Hayner, and that way, when he goes to get the health care he needs, there is assurance that these records haven't been tampered with. These are all the documents, etc. That's an example where you can use the blockchain to help with respect to the government. You could do it, and this is really expansive thinking. You could use it with respect to USAID and all the aid that we use all around the world. There's definite applications for it there. One of the major concerns with USAID is the fact that, yes, you have foreign nationals who steal the money and they go off and do other nefarious things as opposed to what the American taxpayer has been putting that money out to do, which is to provide aid in various forms to people around the world who are frankly in very destitute conditions. So those are just two applications where I think it could definitely be used. In order to get there, though, you're gonna have to have political leadership that is prepared in a lot of respects to reform Washington and reform the inner workings of it. And I think you can really get there. And I think that's with blockchain technology, there is a I would say there's an ability to marry some of those reforms with AI as well, as AI begins to become more mature. Like I love the Terminator movies. I don't want to. I guess I got to be clear. I don't want Skynet taking over DoD. I'm just being honest with you. Don't want them involved in the weapon systems. Don't want that. But in terms of some of the core functions in government agencies, reviewing documentation, etc., passing documentation along, validating and verifying key documentation that you can go back and figure out and do checks for fraud, theft, etc. There's real capabilities for the blockchain to be used in the federal government along with AI technologies.
All right, we do have to wrap up this conversation. I think we could go on forever. It has been so interesting. Thank you so much to our audience for engaging and asking such thoughtful questions. Before we wrap it up, I'm going to ask each of you, Marshall, I'll start with you again. The election's happening in November. Where do we go from here? What do we need to be watching? What's the signal you're watching for that's going to show progress?
Well, regardless of what happens in November, what I want to see happen for blockchain and crypto is to not demonize this space and to not put it into a box and say, well, something bad happened on the blockchain, so all of blockchain is bad. That's like saying somebody did something bad with a car, so let's get rid of cars. I would like to see real positive legislation that puts the United States at the forefront of blockchain technology, looking at this technology from a research standpoint and seeing how we can empower the private industry to really grow these applications. And like Congressman said, when you sign a check, That's an ancient technology where is stenography looking at someone's signature. We now have cryptography. So how can we use this technology to enhance our payment systems, enhance national security? Let's do away with counterfeit currency. And that doesn't mean that I agree with Congressman, that we don't need a CBDC. We already have it today in the crypto space. We have over $100 billion of stablecoin capitalization. Maybe it's 200 billion. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that will be a multi-trillion-dollar capitalization, and we need to embrace this technology and give the proper regulatory frameworks for credit unions and banks and financial institutions to integrate. And I think we need to really look at the rest of the world, what the rest of the world is doing, and recognize that the United States is a beacon of freedom. Blockchain is a litmus test for freedom. And we're going to see very quickly which direction we're going. And we have to be very careful who we trust with that. And I think that really should not be happening outside of the country, but inside of the country. Otherwise, we are trusting elements that are not from America to be the leaders in this technology. And I believe that we will lose Silicon Valley entirely, not just blockchain, but AI and all types of other technology if we push this out of the United States.
Congressman, where do we go from here?
I think where we go is just more activism. Like my background is finance, so I started in commercial banking. I worked in biological settlements in the insurance industry, and then I worked in financial services. I'm securities licensed 7 and 66. I got my start in politics and really political activism when I was in my early 30s. Before that, I was apolitical, didn't care about politics. Like a lot of people don't care about politics. But the funny thing is, politics cares about you a lot. And so I think that for the industry, it's really about activism and focus of the people in the industry to make sure you're kind of getting from the federal government the kind of policy you're looking for. Part of that is campaigns. Part of that is the day in day out effort of trying to educate staffers and lobbyists and policy directors and policy staff in federal agencies, and it never really stops. And I would advocate to the entire industry that I think it starts with people who are elected now, new people that are going to be elected this November. But I would also take a cue from some of the more legacy industries in our country. It never really stops. So you have to be prepared to constantly be advocating for the industry. Because if you don't, somebody will.
I think those are great words to wrap it up on. Congressman Marshall, thank you so much for joining us. That was U.S. Congressman Byron Donalds and Metallicus CEO Marshall Hayner. If you missed the beginning of the discussion, which I see a lot of people in the comments did, you can rewind. You can go back and rewatch to your heart's content. So that is available for you. Thank you so much for watching this live discussion. We'll see you on CoinDesk.com. Thank you and